Hi everyone, this is section 3, table relationships. In the previous chapter we looked at tables and how to create tables and how to set data types and so on and so forth. This is the follow-on chapter. This is section 3, table relationships. This is going to be a short video because the chapter is quite short. The good news is for this level of ECDL they don't require you to know an awful lot about table relationships. Which is good because it can get pretty complicated pretty fast. Excuse me. But we only need to know about one form of relationship that can occur between tables in an Access database. So that's what we'll look at. Before I do, I just want to set up what relationships actually are, because as I'm always banging on, it's important to know what to do, obviously, in the program. But equally important is knowing why you're doing it or what you're actually doing and not just how to do it. So before we jump into Access and start doing things, start actually establishing relationships between tables, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what a table is, or rather a table relationship is, and why we need them. If you remember the introductory day that we had before classes were put on hold, we talked about flat file databases, which was just throwing everything into a notepad file or a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet file, which is fine for small data purposes but isn't great when it comes to large amounts of data. And then we talked about the second kind, which were relational databases. And that's what Microsoft Access is. It's a relational database, which means that we have data in tables, and the data in those tables can be related and can affect, data in one table can affect data in another table. That's the power of a relational database. So what I've got here is a very short example to give you an idea of exactly why we might need to establish relationships between tables, how to do it, and basically why we need to do it, what the advantage of it is, and what the power of it is. So bear with me for 2 seconds and I will open up this example and show you exactly what I mean. So now that we understand a little bit more about relationships and about what they are and why we might need them, let's see how to actually implement a relationship in Access. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a simple database, a very simple database from scratch, and then implement a relationship between two tables in it. And hopefully that will highlight some of the issues that you can have if you don't have relationships, and then you'll see the mitigating factors then that come about as a result of having those relationships, and you'll see why they're such an advantage. So what I'm going to do is click on New, and I'm going to create a brand new blank database, and I'm going to call this College, which will make sense in a moment, because what I'm going to pretend is that this is a database that's being used to capture information for students in a college. So don't forget, whenever you create a brand new blank database, you'll always get one table. You have to have one table to put the data into, otherwise you've nothing to put the data into. And Access gives it the default name Table 1. So I'm immediately going to start designing this table, because at the moment I don't have any fields other than the ID field, which is created for you. But I don't have any other fields into which I can put information. So I'm going to right click on Table 1 and go to Design View. Immediately I'm prompted to save this table, which I'm going to do now, and I'm going to call it Students, because into this table I'm going to put the information for students. I've already got, as I said there a few seconds ago, a primary key field called ID. You'll always have that created for you as part of your blank table. I'm going to rename this student number, because we want each student to have a student number. And I'm going to change the data type from auto number to number. Now you might be asking why this is. Auto number starts at 1 and then goes 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on and so forth. Student numbers though typically tend to be, 1, 3, 5, 9, 8, 2, they typically tend to be longer than that. I don't need to do this, I'm just doing it to prove that you can do it. You do have to be careful though, because this means that you can't put in, Access is not going to increment this for you automatically, so you have to be sure that you're putting in a correct number and a distinct number. It's not going to be an issue for a small example like this. So that's the student number primary key field, and I've changed the data type to number. I'm then going to type in student first name. Sorry, it's hard to type and look at the screen at the same time and record. And I'm going to leave that set as short text, and I'm not going to change the field size because, again, we're not too interested in saving space. This is just as an example. And then student last name. And again, I'll leave that set to short text, and I'll leave it set to 255. I'll also type in email address, and I'll leave that set to short text, and I'll type in phone number, and I'll leave this set to short text as well. So you might be wondering, why not have phone number set as number? The reason for that is that phone number isn't a number in the classical sense. It's not a number that we're going to be making calculations on. We're not going to be adding a number to the phone number to get a new number. It's not really going to be a number in that sense. It's just going to be a string of characters. We might also want to put the phone number in a specific format, let's say with brackets around the area code or the operator prefix, like 087, 085, 052. Or we might want to have a space in between the numbers, or we might want to have a hyphen after the operator or mobile prefix. You can't have any of those if you specify your data type as a number. So we're just going to leave it set as short text. So that's everything. That's all I need to do. I'm going to save that by clicking on the Save button up here in the Quick Access toolbar, and that is my students table. I'm now going to create a second table, which we can do by clicking on the Create tab and going to Table. And again, we have a new table created. It's given the default name Table 1. I can change that, and I will shortly. No, I will now actually, by right-clicking on it and going to Design View. And I'm going to call this Classes. So what I'm imagining here is that I want to create two tables because I'm trying to capture information about the students in the college and also about the classes that the college offers. So I'm going to click OK here. And now I have two tables. And again, same with the students table. When I created it, I have a default field added called ID. It's a primary key already, and its data type is set to auto number. I'm going to delete ID, and I'm going to type in class code. I'm going to pretend that each class has a specific code. And again, I'm going to change this data type from auto number because I don't want it to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm just going to change it to short text. And I'll show you an example of the kind of codes that classes can have. Every class needs a name so that you know exactly what you're applying for if you're in a college, and I'll leave that set to short text. I'll also give a class tutor because every class needs a tutor to deliver the class or to teach the class. I'll give it a department because every class belongs to a specific department in a college, like science or humanities or IT or whatever. And let's see, I'll also give it, I'll just pretend that every class it takes place in a specific, no, not building, let's say room. And again, I'll leave that set to short text. Okay, great. So now I can go back to the students table and I can start adding in some information for students. Now, it's currently, my student number is currently 0. Don't forget, back in Design View, the primary key is now number. It's not auto number, it's number. So I have to put this in myself automatically. I'm just going to go 1, 2, 3. Doesn't really matter what number I put in. And student first name, I'll say that we're adding Joe, and the last name is Murphy. Let's say Joe's email address is joe@gmail.com. Let's say his phone number is 052 12345, and that's it for Joe. That's all the information that we need for Joe. Let's add somebody else. Let's add 456. Let's add Amanda. Let's make her Jones. And let's say Amanda is amanda@yahoo.com. Let's say she's 087 123 4567. And then we'll add one more person, and I'll just make the student number 789, and I'll say that her name is Linda, and let's say her name is Brown, and let's make her Linda also at gmail.com, 085 123 4567. All right. I'm going to save those. Well, actually, you don't need to save. Remember, you don't need to save each row because the second you move on to a new row, these 3 rows are automatically saved or committed to the database. So you don't need to save anything. What I am going to do is click on View and go back to Design View, and just to give you an idea of the field names that I'm putting in, number and everything else is short text. I didn't worry about field properties or anything like that. That's all the information in for students that I'm going to put in right now. I'm just going to widen the email address column so we can see everything, and phone number. This is very like in Excel where you can double left click on the dividing line between your column headers to make the column as wide as it needs to be to accommodate the widest thing in it. Now I need to add some information for classes. So I'm going to double left click on classes, and I'm going to type in ABC, and I'll type in introduction to, let's say, computers. And I'm also going to give a class tutor, let's say Mike Ryan, and let's say the department is, it's in the IT department, and let's say it's taking place in classroom 12, okay? Let's add another few, let's say CDE. Obviously the class codes don't mean anything, I'm just putting them in for the sake of it, but notice that they are different, they are unique. And let's say learning woodwork, and let's say Alan Jones. Note that the class tutor, ideally, this is not a good idea for a field name. You'd normally have the class tutor's name split into two, but you know, just for the sake of keeping it simple, I've just put the class tutor's name in as one field. Department, let's say, well, I don't know, it's in the crafts department, let's say, and let's say it's in classroom 3. And we'll add one more, ADFGH, and let's say introduction to, I don't know, French, let's say. All right, and we'll make Nora Smith, and it's in the languages department, and let's say the classroom is number 7. Okay, so again, no need to save this because the minute you go on to a new row, these 3 rows, or records, as you can also call them, have now been automatically committed to the database. So far so good. We're adding information, and there, you know, there's nothing new or strange or mysterious here, until it comes to actually connecting these 2 tables together. And the problem is they're not connected. There's no connection whatsoever between these 2 tables. They're totally separate entities, and changing information in one is not going to change information in the other. More crucially, however, I have no idea by looking at the classes database who's doing what class. I don't know which of my students, if any of them, are signed up for these classes. And vice versa, if I look at my students, I don't know which of these students are doing which of these classes, because the tables are not related. There's no connection between them. So how do I do that? How do I get around that? Well, what I could do is, now you wouldn't do this, but you could, let's say, go into the classes table, and I could add in design view, I could add another field name, and I could say student name, first name, and I could make that short text, and I could add student last name, make that short text. Save the changes and then go back to datasheet view, and I could say that, oh, let's say Joe Ryan is doing introduction to computers. I do have a Joe Ryan. No, sorry, it's Joe Murphy. Let me just change that. And I could say that Amanda Jones is doing learning woodwork. And I could finally say that Linda Brown is doing introduction to French. Now, this is a terrible way of doing it, and you'll see why shortly. I can look at classes and I can see, great, Joe Murphy is doing introduction to computers, but I have no other information about Joe. I don't have Joe's email address, I don't have his phone number, I can't access that from the classes database. And there might be lots of other information about Joe that I might be keeping in students, like his GPA or his postal address or God knows what else, which I can't access from the classes database. I can only access his name. Secondly, what if there are 2 Joe Murphys, which there could easily be, doing introduction to computers? Then I'm in trouble. Also, and this is even more crucial, if I decide that Joe Murphy is not doing introduction to computers, I can delete the record by going right-clicking on the row number or the row label here and going to delete record. Microsoft Access says, are you sure? I'm going to click on yes. Problem though is if I go back to the students table, I still have a record of Joe Murphy here, which is fine, But again, I don't know that Joe has been deleted from. I didn't even know he was in it in the first place, but even if I did, I now have no information pertaining to the fact that he's been removed from it. So what I could do is I could go back to students, sorry, go back to classes, and let's put that in again. Let's put Joe in. Notice there's no undo for after you've deleted a record. Once it's gone, so you have to put it in again. So introduction to computers, and class tutor is Mike Ryan, I think I said, and it was in IT, and it was in 12, I think I said. And student first name is Joe, and student last name is Murphy. Okay, so Joe is back there now. Now, however, when I look at students, I still have no idea if Joe is doing any of the courses. So what I can do is, in Design View, again, you wouldn't do this, but I'm going to show you the problems that you can run into when you're not using relationships. I can put a course, and I can make it short text. So I can add that column to the student's database. So now if I go back to Datasheet View, I can now say, yes, that Joe is doing Introduction to Computers. Let me just widen that out. Great. However, that really isn't a connection to this here. There's no connection. And I'll show you why there's no connection, or prove that there is no connection to you. I'm going to go back into classes, and I'm going to say, pretend that Joe just phoned up and said that it's Introduction to Computers is not for him and he wants to be removed. So I'm going to right click in the classes table and delete the record. And click on yes. Problem is, when I go back into students, Joe Murphy is still down here. I still have information in here about Joe doing Introduction to Computers. So that clearly is not correct. That's data integrity is gone out the window there. One part of the database has been changed, and it hasn't informed another part of the database because there's no connection between the two. So clearly that's not what you want. Secondly, as well, when I was typing in Introduction to Computers in the students table under course name, if I don't type it exactly right, if I make, let's say, a spelling mistake and I don't catch it like that, that's going to cause problems later on when we start looking at queries. I've misspelled introduction here intentionally. If that was not spelled the same as the way I had it spelled here, the computer's not going to know. The computer's going to take as gospel whatever we type in. So clearly that's not the way to do it. What we're doing is we're mixing and matching multiple different types of information in two different tables, and they're not connected, and making a change in one is not having any effect in the other. The whole point of relational databases and the point of relating tables and relating data in tables is that if you change information in one, it's going to update data in the other one. That's the whole point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the classes table in Design View, and I'm going to delete student last name, and I'm going to delete student first name, and I'm going to save that change. So I'm just back to the way I was now. I'm also going to go back into students, and I'm going to go back into Design View, and I'm going to delete course name. Now it says, do you want to permanently delete the selected fields and all the data? There's only one piece of data in there at the moment, the Introduction to Computers. Fine. So clearly that is not the way to do it. That is not the way to do it. You'll run into all sorts of terrible problems, and you'll lose data, and data will be, the integrity of the data will be broken. So instead it makes much more sense to have what's known as a relationship between the two tables. So in the next section what I'm going to do is show you how to create a relationship between these two tables. I'm going to show you how to relate two pieces of specific information between the two tables, so that when we change information in one, those changes will be those changes will propagate across to the other table, and so that we don't have to worry about our data integrity there. So that's what we'll look at in the next section. Hi everyone, in the previous section I had, actually I lied. I told you I was going to show you how to establish the relationship between the two tables, and then I didn't. I just showed you how, when you don't establish relationships, what happens, the disadvantages and the problems that you can run into. In this video, we are going to see how to establish a relationship between the two tables that we have in our college database. We only have two tables, classes and students. If I double left click on classes to open up that table, you can see that I've put in 4 records. I've just made up some classes and some tutors and departments, class numbers and some class codes. And I've made up an additional 1 or 2 students as well, just so that I have some information to work with. So for each student, they have a student number, a first name, a last name, an email address, and a phone number. And each class has a class code, a class name, a class tutor, a department, and a classroom. The student number is the primary key field for the students table, and the class code is the primary key field for the classes table. So that's our way of uniquely identifying each record in both the students and classes tables. Now remember, the problem that we're trying to solve here is that if I look at the classes table, I have no way of knowing who's doing what. And if I look at the students table, again, I have no way of knowing who's doing what, who's signed up for what class. So I want to establish a link between students and classes. We saw that we could do it the way not to do it in the previous example would be to put in an additional column here in classes and then have their, student first name, student last name. But then in students, I'd have to do the same thing. I'd have to have a class column here, and I'd have to put in the classes here, and I'd have to make sure that I spelt the same information correct in both tables. And there's an awful lot of duplication of effort and a lot of scope for error when you're typing in. Plus, when I delete something from one table, the other table isn't updated because it doesn't know anything about it. The 2 tables are not even remotely related. So that's the problem we're going to solve here now. What I want to do is I want to have establish a link between these 2 tables. So let's examine it. How do we establish that link? If I look at the classes table here, I have class code, class name, tutor, department, and classroom. What piece of information from the students table, what field from the students table could I include in the classes table to refer back to an individual student who's doing that class? Hopefully you've guessed that the most appropriate field is the student number field. That's the primary key, which refers to the student. And it's the unique, non-repeatable piece of information about each student. No 2 students can have the same number. So that's the piece of information I want to include in the classes field, or in the classes table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Design View for Classes, and I'm going to add a new field called Student Number. And I'm going to make it a number. I'm going to make the data type number. The reason I'm making it number is that it has to match the data type that's in the students table. The name technically doesn't need to be the same, but it's a good idea to keep the name the same. But it has to be the same data type or the relationship won't work. So that's what I've done in the classes table. I've created a new field called student number, and I've set the data type to number. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my students table, and I'm going to take Joe Murphy as an example. His student number is 123. So I'm going to go into classes, and now you can see that I have a student number field, and I can put in the student numbers for each person who's doing one of these classes. So I'm going to pretend that Joe is doing learning woodwork, and I'm also going to pretend that he's doing learning maths. 1, 2, 3. All right. And again, I don't need to save, because once I go on to a new row or the next row in the table, the previous row's details are committed to the database, or saved if you like. Great. So that's the piece of information put in, but the relationship still hasn't been established. So here's how we actually establish the relationship. I'm going to close down both of these tables, save the changes the design changes to that, and I'm going to go to the Database Tools tab up here at the top, and I've got a Relationships group, and I've got 2 objects, or 2 tools in the group: relationships and object dependencies. We won't be doing anything with object dependencies, but we will click on the Relationships tool. And I've got a dialog box popping up, the Show Table dialog box, which is asking me which tables in my database do I want to establish a relationship between. If you had multiple tables or dozens of tables in a very large database, you could pick and mix here. We only have 2, so I'm going to select both of them by holding down my Control key and clicking on both of them, left clicking on both of them, and then clicking Add. And now I can get rid of this box by clicking on the Close box, or Close button, to close down that dialog box. I'm just going to rearrange these by clicking on the title bar and rearranging them. You don't need to, but I like to do it. Now here's the clever bit. What I want to do is I want to take the student number field here in the students table, and I want to click and left click, holding my mouse button down. I want to click and drag it across onto the classes table. But you need to be careful where you release the mouse button, where you drop it. I want to drop it right on top of the student number field over in classes. If I don't Well, it's not a big deal. You can fix it if you don't. And this is a bit of a design flaw. I always think in Access, I think the fields should light up when you're over the field that you want to be, so that when you know when you're releasing the mouse button that you're dropping it onto the right field. So just make sure that your mouse is over the student number field in the classes table and release the mouse button, and you will get up the following dialog box. This is the Edit Relationships dialog box. The source table is over here, students, and the table that we want to relate this table to is over here in the related table section. And you can see that I'm relating students to classes. And the fields I'm relating are student number in the students table to student number in the classes table. I'm also going to tick these three boxes: enforce referential integrity, cascade update related fields, and cascade delete related records. That sounds really horrible, and I'm going to explain what they mean very shortly. Finally, we can see that the relation type is one-to-many, and that's all we have to do. We're going to click on the Create button, and we're going to get the following line which connects the two tables, and there's a 1 on this side and there's a many on this side. And this is exactly what we want. We want what's known as a one-to-many relationship. In other words, one student can be signed up for many classes. This little symbol here is the infinity logo, or the infinity symbol, and it means the many side of the relationship. There are other types of relationships in Access, but fortunately we only need to know about one-to-many. There's also one-to-one, and there's many-to-many relationships as well, which can get horribly complicated. But for the exam, you only need to know about one-to-many relationships. So hopefully this makes sense. What we did is we created a relationship between the students table and the classes table, and the field that we're referring back to our students using the student number field. And that creates what's known as a one-to-many relationship. So in other words, one student can be signed up for many classes. I'm going to click on the Close button, and I'll be prompted to save the layout of this relationship, which I want to do, and I'm going to click Yes. Now let's see what kind of impact that's had on our students table. If I double click on students, you'll see that this little plus button has been added to all of the records in my database, in my students database. And if I click on the plus button next to Joe, I can see that Joe has been signed up for the following two classes. And all of the information that I need from the classes department, such as the class tutor and department and so on and so forth, that's all being pulled from the classes table, and I can view it here. So that's the magic of relationships. That's why they're so useful. So all of that information is being pulled from here back into the students table. If I click on the plus button for George, I don't have anything because I haven't added George's student number in for any classes here. Similarly for Amanda and Linda. I've only added Joe. Let's add him for another one. Let's say that he's doing Introduction to French as well. 1, 2, 3. That's because that's Joe's student number. Now if I go back to students, I should see when I click the plus button that Joe has also been added into Introduction to French. These are known as sub-data sheets. So in other words, they're data sheets that are generated as a result of the relationship between the two tables. So that in a nutshell is how we create a relationship between two tables. That's the end of this section. In the next section, we're going to basically do another example, just a variation on a theme, and I'm going to explain what that horribly technical mumbo jumbo was about referential integrity and cascading records and so on and so forth. It's not too hard to understand, and that we're almost going to be at the end of table relationships. So as I said, it's going to be a short video. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next section. We're going to keep going with table relationships. Believe it or not, we're almost at the end of the chapter. In the previous example, I moved away from the book and I'd done my own example with the colleges, with the students and with the classes, just to give you some backstory. I'm going to go back to the book now, and we're going to open up, as you can see, I've opened up Staff, or it might be Staff 1 on your computer if you had to do what I did earlier on as well, to resave it as Staff 1. And when you have that table or that database open, you'll see that you've got two tables, courses and staff. So I'm going to double left click to open each one of them. And as you can see, as always, when you double left click on an object, it opens up in its own tab over here, and we can view the object, whatever it is, tables or forms or queries or reports or whatever they are, over here in the main view window. If I have a look at the staff table, you can see that there's a plus sign beside each record. And cast your mind back to the previous video, we saw that that plus sign was placed beside each student, and it means that there's a sub-data sheet, which means that there's a link, there's some kind of relationship that exists between the staff table and the courses table. So if you ever see a table with plus signs beside each record, it means that the table in question that you have open is connected or related to some other table in the database. Now, the only other table, of course, in this database that the staff can be related to is courses, because it's the only other table in the database. Let's have a look then at the relationship and see what it's like. I'm going to click on Database Tools, and I'm going to click on Relationships. And you can do that when you click on Database Tools and Relationships. We did that in the previous example to create a relationship, and you can also do it to view any existing relationships that may be set up. So we can see that we have pretty much exactly what we had in the previous video. We have the two tables related in a one-to-many relationship. In other words, one employee can do many courses. Here's our one symbol, and here's our infinity symbol, which signifies the many side of the relationship. And that makes sense because one staff member can presumably be signed up to many courses or to multiple courses. Note as well that in the courses table we have an employee number field, and that is referring back to the employee number field in the staff table, which is the primary key in the staff table. That's how we refer back to staff to get all this other information that we have, that we might need to get about the staff person, such as their surname and their first name and so on and so forth, their position and so on and so forth. If I go into staff and in design view, you can see employee number is the primary key field. And if I go into courses in design view, you can see that I also have an employee number field here, which is set to number. It's set to the same data type as the employee number in the staff table. So that's what's referring back and what's connecting the two tables to each other. So if I go back to the relationships window, you can see I have a one-to-many relationship. Let's go back into the regular datasheet view, and I can see a plus sign. As I said, that means the sub-data sheet. So if I click, for instance, on the plus sign for employee number 146, that's Mr. Peter Nider. If I click on the plus sign, sorry, I can't do that while I have the relationships window open. Let me just close that down. Click on the plus sign, you can see that Peter Nider is doing how to influence people and win friends. And I can click on the minus sign to close down that sub-data sheet. If I click on, let's say, Kira Lee, let's see what she's doing. She's also doing how to influence people and win friends. If I left click on Anthony Chamberlain, he's not doing any courses. Leslie Jones, not doing any courses. Ellen Ripley, not doing any courses. So a lot of them aren't doing courses. That makes sense if you look at the number of courses there. There isn't one. Not every staff member is doing a course. Let's look at Peter Nider. We saw that his employee number was 146. We can see he's doing how to influence people and win friends. And so is employee number 537. So that's Peter Nider and Kira Lee are both doing how to influence people and win friends. Now here's something I didn't show you in the previous example, but that's when you delete something. If I delete a record from the courses table by right-clicking on the row selector and go to delete record, obviously I'm being told you're about to delete it. I can't undo it, so I have to be sure. So I'm okay with it. I'll click yes. Now if I go back to staff, and if I left-click on Peter Nider's sub-data sheet button, you can see there's no information there any longer about doing that course. And that's the power and the advantage of relationships between tables. If I had manually done this, if I had added a column in the staff table for course name, and I had manually entered in that Peter Nider was doing how to influence people and win friends, if I deleted that from the courses table, which I've just done, I would also have had to go back to the staff table and deleted it from there as well. And similarly for Kira Lee, which I'm going to do now as well. I'm going to go back to courses. Employee number 537, just collapse Peter Nider's one. 537 is Kira Lee. So let's right click and delete that record from courses. Click on yes, and now let's go back to staff. And if I expand Kira Lee's sub-data sheets, you can see she's no longer registered as doing that course. She's no longer down as doing that course in my staff table. So updating the data in one updates the data in another because the tables are related. Again, if I'd had that column in manually and done it the non-correct way of doing it, the non-relationship way of doing it, I would have had to update and delete the record or the column in the staff table as well. That's why we have relationships, because we wanted the data to be related to each other. So that's our one-to-many relationship. That's the plus button means that we have sub-data sheets That's our link that shows the link between the two tables, and it shows us exactly who's doing what, the course and the date. And the employee number simply refers back then to the staff table. So as you can see, there's no need in the courses table to have employee name, first name, last name, position, date of employment, NI number. I can get all that by simply referring back using the primary key field. If I look in staff, in design view, I can see that employee number is a primary key field. It's set to number. And in courses in design view, I have also put in employee number as a number, a data type as a number. It's not a primary key in courses, it doesn't need to be. It's referring back to, however, the primary key employee number field in staff. So hopefully that is making sense. Let's apply a relationship now. Let's do our own one again like we did in colleges or the college database. I'm going to go to File, I'm going to go to Open, and I'm looking for a database in my ECDL data files folder called CIA. I'll double left click to open it. I'm just going to save the changes to the layout of table staff and courses. So again, I'm getting a message shouted at me by Access here that I need to enable the content, and I also need to make I need to save it as something else, CIA1. So I'm going to save it. This may not happen for you. It might. That's how you get around it. If you do, you just save it with a 1 on the end of it. And I'll click on the enable content. And now I'm going to be able to make changes to the table. Now this database looks a bit more involved. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tables, and we have 4 forms. Doesn't really matter though how many tables are in it, because the process is the same for making relationships. Let's click on the database tools and click on the relationships button, and we can see currently that no relationships exist for this database between any of the tables. We're going to fix that now. We're actually going to create a database, or create a relationship between some tables. If you don't see, when we click on add tables, if you don't see the add tables or the show table dialog box, you can click on add tables and that will produce the show tables dialog box. Don't forget that's always going to show you the tables that are in your database. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we have the 6 tables over here listed here. So Access is asking, between what 2 tables do you want to produce or establish this relationship? So what we're going to do, let's see what tables they want us to do it. We're going to click on customer details to highlight it, and we'll click on add, and that's going to add that there. And we're also going to click on orders, and we're going to click add, and then I can click on close. I could have added them both at the same time. So I've just added those 2 tables, but I still don't have a relationship between them. What I'm going to do is to establish that relationship is, remember from our staff example and from our colleges example, what we want to do is, you're normally going to be doing it on the primary key field. You're going to be, that's in your base table or your source table, that's the field that you're going to be using to connect the 2 tables. So what I want to do is take the customer reference primary key field in the customer details table. I want to hold my button down on it, and I want to drag it to the customer reference field in the orders table. So ideally, both of those field names should be the same, and they've done it properly here. They have named them the same. They haven't said, you know, customer number or something like that. So you know that you're dragging it onto the right one. Keep your mouse button over it and then release the button, and you'll get an Edit Relationships dialog box. So again, on the left hand side, the source table, which is customer details, and here's the fields that we're dragging across. And then on the related table, the table that we want to relate back to this table, which is orders, we have customer reference over here as well. And that's exactly what we want. Okay, so what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to click on Enforce Referential Integrity, just like I did in the previous 2 examples, or in the previous 1 example. We didn't do the second one, we just looked at one that was there already, but we did it for the college database. I'm going to left click on these 3 boxes here and click on Create, and again I get a one-to-many relationship. In other words, one customer can obviously place many orders. That makes sense. You're not just going to get a customer that's going to order one thing and it's never going to order again, or you're not going to allow them to place multiple orders. We're going to allow one customer to make many orders. Let's double left click on the orders table and see if we can delete one of them and see how it affects the details in customer details. I've got a customer reference number here, 26. So if I go back to customer details and look for 26, I can see that it's Miss Pippa Smith. and these are all of her details along here. Okay, so if I go back to orders, and if I right click on that order and select, well, first of all, let me go back to customer details and let me expand it to see that she's got two orders, 200 and 221. Okay, so I'm going to collapse that again. So she's in here twice. In fact, she's in here up here and she's in here up here. So she's got two orders from us. I'm going to delete one of them. I'm going to delete the order reference 200 by right clicking on it, going to delete record and clicking on yes. And this should have back in customer details deleted, and it has. Now we only have, you can see it deleted here, now we only have order reference 221. So for instance, she may have placed an order and then she might have cancelled it and we want to delete that from our database. That's an example of that. So that is pretty much the second last thing, the very, very last thing that we're going to look at in this video is that referential integrity thing. We've already done it. We've done it twice now. We've done it in this CIA database and we did it in our college database as well. Just going to explain exactly what it is, and we're going to look at how to update and delete records, which we've kind of done already, but I'll just give you another very quick example of it and then we're done. That's the end of table relationships section 3. So thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video. Hi everyone, in this last part of the section 3 table relationships section and accompanying video, I'm going to talk about referential integrity. We've already seen how to implement it. If you remember from the previous video, what we did was we went to database tools, we clicked on relationships, and on the line between the two of them, if I can right click on the line which exists between these two tables now, between the vehicles table and the repairs table, this is a one-to-many relationship, which means that one vehicle can have had a number of repairs or many repairs carried out on it. If you right click on the line which exists between the two tables and click on edit relationship, the only thing that we needed to do to enforce referential integrity was literally click on the box that says enforce referential integrity. And that's a classic kind of question that you might be asked. They may show you the dialog box in the exam and they might ask, where do you actually click to enforce it? Well, you click on the box to enforce it. Or they may show you a screen like this with two tables and they might ask you to enforce referential integrity on the relationship between the two tables. To do that, you simply right click on the line, go to edit relationship, and then make sure that the box is ticked. We can also clear the box and that would turn off referential integrity. So that was in the previous video. Now I just want to talk very, very briefly, this will be short, about why we might want to enforce referential integrity and what can happen if you don't have it enforced. So I'm going to leave it switched on for now. Basically, when it's enforced, when referential integrity is enforced, it means the deletion of records from the primary table, remember this is our primary table, is controlled. Okay? It means that we won't be able to delete certain records from this table. And it also means that we won't be able to update the primary key for any of the vehicles. Okay? And similarly, in the related table, related records won't be able to be created. We won't be allowed to create records in the related table, in the repairs table, if a field is not available in the primary table. Now, this will make more sense in a second. I'm going to show you an example of this. I'm going to open the vehicles table. All right, I'm going to close down my relationships window. And I've opened the vehicles table. And I'm going to click to the left of the record down here, this registration number R654TFG, the Cortina. All right. I'm going to right click on that record and I'm going to try and delete it. I'm going to click on the delete record button. And I'm immediately getting a dialog box which says that the record can't be deleted or changed because the table repairs includes related records. So what does this mean? Well, it simply means, I'm going to click OK there. It simply means that there is a record in the repairs table for this car. And if I click on the plus button, you can see that there is a record in the repairs table. Let's go into it and see. So it's R654TFG. If I go into the repairs table, I can see that somewhere down along here, where is it? There it is down at the bottom. This means because this record is in the repairs table, it means that I'm not allowed to delete the vehicle, the vehicle's details from the vehicles table. It means I'd end up with, if I was to delete this record here in the repairs table would be left. it will be known as an orphan entry because it wouldn't have anything to refer back to it. That's what I mean by referential integrity and by data integrity. We want to ensure that if we're updating something in one table, that it's updated in another table, okay? That we're not left with orphan entries. That's what are known as orphan entries. So just to reiterate, if I delete this, I'm going to try and delete it again, and I'm told I can't delete it because table repairs includes related records. Here in repairs is the related record for this. So I cannot delete this record from vehicles because it's got a related record down here in the repairs table. Okay, so that's why referential integrity is good. Okay, it's just going to maintain the integrity of our data. I'm going to go to the repairs table again in datasheet view. This is datasheet view, and on the home tab, I'm going to create a new record. Okay, I'm going to go down to the next row. I don't need to type in a job number because it's auto number. Access will put it in for me. And I'm going to put in a new record. I'm going to type in the name of the mechanic is David, and I'm going to type in the following license plate number E789. Sorry, E789 space ABC. And I'm going to say that it was done on the 5th of the 1st, 2012. Sorry, my numeric keyboard was turned off, or my numeric keypad was turned off. My numlock basically was off. So I'm going to type in the 5th of the 1st, 2012. And I'm going to tab down onto a new row, and I'm immediately told I can't add or change a record because a related record is required in table vehicles. All right. So I can't do that. I can't put in a record if there isn't a matching field, a matching record in the repairs table. In the vehicles table. This makes sense. I'm trying to put in a job for a car, E789ABC, in the repairs table, but if I go back to vehicles, no information exists for that vehicle, which means that in the related table, in the repairs table, I can't create a record for that job. All right? It wouldn't make sense. Again, I would have an orphan entry in my related table, in my repairs table. This record here is referring to a vehicle that does not exist in this table. So for that reason, I can't put in this record. Okay, so I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to delete record and click on yes to ensure that I can't I can't add that record anyway, but I'm just going to delete the aborted attempt that I was making to put in the record. So I hope that made sense. When referential integrity is enforced in a relationship between two tables, I cannot put an entry in the related table for something that doesn't exist in the primary or in the source table. In this case, I can't put in a repair for a car when there is no entry for that car in the source table, all right, with referential integrity implemented. So hopefully that makes sense. Finally, I'm just going to show you this is the very last part of this video. We saw in the previous video that when we have referential integrity turned on, I'm going to go to Database Tools, Relationships, right click on the line between them and edit relationships, and we saw enforced referential integrity is now turned on, which is great, which means that I'm not allowed to do certain things now. I'm not allowed to create an entry in my related table for which there is no source in the primary or the source table. So I can't create a repair job for a vehicle in the repairs table if that vehicle doesn't exist in the vehicles table. Here's something else I can't do when I have referential integrity turned on. Imagine if I had one of the registration numbers incorrect. I'd placed it in incorrectly in the vehicles table, and somebody came along and told me, and I have to change the vehicle number, registration number for this Volvo to B124 instead of B123. When I try to go off the record, I'm told the record can't be deleted or changed because table repairs includes deleted records. Again, that's referential integrity. I can't change the primary key field here because it's going to create incorrect data in the other table. It's not going to update automatically in the other table. in the repairs table. So this B123, wherever it is, it's in there somewhere. Here it is. That wouldn't be updated as a result of me changing it here. That's just the primary key. I could change anything else here, but I cannot change a primary key field in the source table when I have referential integrity turned on. So to get around that, what we can do is, if I go back to database tools and relationships, if I right click on the line between the two and go to edit relationships, I can turn the following two boxes on: cascade update related fields and cascade delete related records, and click OK. Now it's going to tell you that you can't make any changes. I wanted to leave these two open to show you this error that you might get sometimes. You can't make changes to a relationship between two tables if the tables are open. So I have to close down this box and then close down my repairs table and my vehicles table. I'll go back in now and go to edit relationship, and now I can turn these two boxes on. Okay, so enforced referential integrity is still on, but this time I'm asking access to cascade update related fields and to cascade delete related records, and click OK. Now I can close down my relationships. Now I can show you, if I go into vehicles and somebody says that the license plate for the Volvo is wrong, it should be B124, I can now change it, and when I go onto a new record, that's updated. Not only is it updated here, but the change will have cascaded or gone across to the repairs table. So if I've gone back into the repairs table, you can see that it's automatically changed to B124 here as well. And that makes sense. You're going to want to be able to do that, okay? Yeah, in certain cases you won't need that implemented, but in this particular case you do. So hopefully that's made sense. I'll go back to the vehicles table and change another one. I'll change this license plate for the Austin. Is it the Austin? Yeah, G784. I'll change it to G785. And again, once I go off that record, that change is now saved in this table. But if I go into the repairs table, you'll see G785. It was previously G784. So that's, if I go back into relationships and right click on edit relationship, that's that box here. Cascade update related fields. If I didn't have that box turned on, I wouldn't have been able to make changes to the registration numbers in my primary table, in my source table. All right. Finally, we're going to look at deleting now. If I'm going to go into the vehicles table, and I'm going to try and delete one of these records. So if I right click on, there are two jobs for this Jaguar. So if I right click on this and go to delete record, I'm going to get the following dialog box. Relationships that specify cascading deletes are about to cause one record in this table to be deleted. Obviously that's this record here, along with related records in related tables to be deleted. So let's have a look. I've got this record here for the Jaguar, E975DAW. Let's find it over here. E975DAW, there it is. And there's another one down here. So this vehicle had two jobs done on it by John and Albert. So I want to delete the record here in the vehicles table, making sure that we understand now what this box is saying. It's going to delete the record here. And it's also, sorry, I clicked on the, and it's also going to delete them from the repairs table. So those two jobs are now gone from the repairs table. It deleted the two Jaguar jobs from the repairs table as well. So that is the second thing that we implemented here, cascade delete update records, okay? It means that when we delete something from our primary table, any related records in the related table are also going to be deleted. Again, if I didn't have that, I'm going to turn those off again. Again, you can't make any changes to a relationship when a table is open. So I'm going to turn these two off again. Close down my relationships table and go back into vehicles. I'm going to try and delete one of these records, and I'm told I can't because repairs includes related records. So in other words, there is a reference to this repair job based on the license plate number in the Rover in the repairs table. Rover, yeah, there it is there, okay? So I can't do that. Likewise, I can't make any changes to the vehicles in the vehicles table, so I couldn't change the license plate for this because repair includes related records. The changes aren't going to cascade across. So in order to do that, I had to right click, go to edit relationship and make sure that these two boxes were ticked. And again, don't forget, I keep forgetting it myself, you can't make changes to a table relationship when a table is open. Now if I put these back on, I can close that off now, and now I will be able to do it. Now I can change anything I want for any registration number in the vehicles table, and it's not going to be a problem. It's going to cascade across to the other table, and I can also right click and delete a record from here, and I can delete records from here as well. You'll always get that message saying that if you delete the record here in the primary table, related records in the related table will be deleted, and you can click on yes if you are sure. So that's it. That's the end of section 3, table relationships. As I said, we don't need to know an awful lot about it, and I recommend looking back over the referential integrity part of it just to make sure that you have it right in your head. I can't be 100% certain as to what kind of questions they're going to ask, but they're not going to ask you anything too in-depth. So that's the end of that section. The next 2 sections are going to be quite short, so the next 2 videos will be quite short. We're going to be looking at editing, just looking ahead here. Editing is going to be very short. That's just things like editing existing tables and changing column widths. And we'll be looking at sorting and filtering. That's going to be quite short as well. Then we have the big 3. Okay, that's going to bring us up to 5 chapters done. Then we're going to have the big 3, which are 3 other objects. Queries, forms, and reports. We're finished with tables now. Tables, don't forget, are the most fundamental object in Access, so we always have to spend a little bit of time looking at them, but now we're finished with tables. So we've got editing, sorting, and query left to do. Sorting and filtering left to do. And then we have our 3 remaining chapters, queries, forms, and reports left to do. So we'll get through it as we always do. So thanks for watching, and as always, if you have any questions, please drop me a line.